This is about Darwin, Poincare, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, and Freud. I wrote about Charles Darwin after I read his engaging book about the 5-year circumnavigation of the planet in the HMS Beagle. Some things I did not know about him. He was seasick much of the time, and over 5 years, that's a heap of seasickness. He very rarely used the word evolution, and he spent the last years of his life working on his final book about earthworms and how they produce compost and how that is vital to the continuing existence of the earth, what people today now call sustainability. Then there was the French mathematician Jules-Henri Poincare. I think that's right. I understood very little of what he did, but a lot of people thought he was hot stuff. Here's an example of both, what he did and how I didn't understand it. There was a prize offered by the King of Sweden and Norway for anyone who could solve what was called the three-body problem. How do you determine the motion of three bodies in space if you know their starting points? Poincare worked on this for 3 years, and his solution was so long and complicated that the mathematicians evaluating it had to admit that they did not understand it. They asked Poincare if he could explain it, so he wrote another 100 pages, and he won the prize. They said, "We don't think you solved it, but what you have done here is so amazing that we're going to give you the prize anyway." He's also credited with inventing, if that's the right word, 2 new branches of mathematics, topography and dynamical systems, also called the quantitative theory of differential equations. The book said modern math could not function without topography, and the other thing has led to what is called chaos theory, which I think means that things in this world are so complicated that even if you're using a simple equation, it is rarely possible to predict what is going to happen. I know that's true in life. I guess it's so in math too. Finally, Poincare is also credited with coming up with the theory of relativity at the same time as Einstein, and Poincare was more interested in arriving at solutions that are beautiful to contemplate rather than formulas or numbers that are the precise answer to any question. I think he arrived at that place, and he was given much acclaim in his lifetime and after his death as well. Next is Sigmund Freud, and I have a problem with that because I don't think psychoanalysis is a science. You may say literary criticism. You may as well say literary criticism is a science. This is not to say that Freud's work was unimportant. He was sincerely trying to treat and understand people with neuroses, what we today call mental illness, and we still can't do much about it. Freud's work was deep and systematic, breaking up a personality into id, ego, and superego, and placing sex, as in the Oedipus complex, at the center of the psychic drama. And each individual does undergo a great deal of purely internal conflict. If I were analyzing the psyche, I would give great importance to the arrival in the consciousness of not being in the future, of dying, death. In the Oedipal story, for example, the riddle of the Sphinx is not about sex, it's about aging, and therefore ultimately ceasing to be. All of a sudden, you have to get a new bearing in life in order to go on living and functioning. Some people do this much less successfully than others. You could easily blame your parents for bringing you into this imperfect world. I can see all sorts of defects and distortions arising from the realization that you are not immortal. That, as they say, is a real game changer. The game, life, literally changes because of death. It's enough to crack anybody up. Freud was a major figure in his lifetime, respected and controversial, mainly because of his emphasis on sex. Now I would say his reputation has slipped, though his name is still widely recognized.